Hi, and welcome back to another episode of the Blissful Life. I'm your host, Samantha Gregory, the self-care alchemist. And today I have a very special interview with Tara Jefferson. She is the founder of the Self-Care Suite, which I love that. And she is here to have a conversation with me about self-care and wellness and Black women and how we can change the narrative around self-care for Black women and how important it is for us to embrace the self-care lifestyle. So welcome, Tara. Thank you so much for being with us. I would love for you to tell us about who you are, how long you've been doing what you've been doing, and a fun fact about you.
Sure. I first want to say I'm happy to have this conversation with you because I have been having these conversations about Black women and self-care and wellness pretty consistently, like my full-time job since about 2015. And back then, when I was starting, there was not this wide range of platforms like this where we could have these conversations. Back in 2014, I was in one of the deepest depressive episodes that I had had. And I was just really tired of cycling in and cycling out and going to different therapists. Like I just really wanted something that was sustainable so that I could feel a little bit more anchored and grounded in my life and be able to handle the things that I needed to handle. And so I started doing all of the things that, like, all at once that I could to better take care of myself. Everything from setting boundaries with different people to I was a full-time self-employed consultant at the time. I got rid of everybody except one, except for one client, the one that paid the most. I kept
Mhm.
them. I started going to therapy, started going to the gym, did all of these things, tackled some really difficult things in my marriage. And after some time, I began to feel so much lighter and so much more at peace with myself. Clearly, there's still things that I'm working on and working through, but I recognize that I wanted to have some of these conversations about wellness and self care, particularly for Black women. And that's when in 2015, I started the Self Care Suite. So we actually started it by doing a self care retreat, getting
Mhm.
people out of their daily lives and into a space where they can focus solely on themselves. We've had retreats over the years, different sister circles, workshops. Since the pandemic, a lot of our work has been virtual, which is still great, still wonderful to connect with people, even if it is via Zoom. And really, the point of the Self Care Suite is to be able to give women a safe space to think about what wellness means to them. What types of advice and tips and tricks can we pick up from each other? Because I do believe that self care is a beautiful thing. And even though it's called the Self Care Suite, we're really based in learning how to do self care together. So it's really
Mhm.
about that communal care and that community mindset. And I think it's been wonderful. It's been working and it's allowed me to meet people like you. So I absolutely love the work that I do. Absolutely.
Beautiful. I love it as well. I do remember when you were starting this and how I was just like, wow, yeah, self-care is so much so needed. But I was in a space where it was like, yeah, I'm gonna get to it. It'll happen. I'll go and get a massage. I'll go do this, do that. But now my mindset has taken a completely 180.
Mhm.
And it's so important to have trailblazers like you who are talking about it, shouting it from the rooftops, telling people that this is something you really need to navigate as well as understand and embody as a woman, as a Black woman specifically, which takes me into this mindset of not just a mindset, but the narrative that Black women really don't get to take time out for themselves. Yeah, we may do a retreat, which is amazing. We may do massages. We may go get our nails done, get the mani-pedi, have brunch with our besties and stuff. But at the root of it, at the core of it, you find yourself having to go back to those things over and over again because you really haven't embodied what self-care is. What have you seen in that space?
I have definitely seen, so there is a couple of different stages that I feel like women who first encounter like self-care messages or it's brought to their attention, hey, you could be doing this or you could be doing that. There's a couple of different stages that women go through it's pretty consistent, right? So
Mhm.
the first one is I'm busy. I don't have time for that. That's for other people. I got too many things to do. I don't even know where I would begin. They have that mindset usually because they are so busy. They have so many obligations and their plate is really full that self care to them almost sounds like something else to do, like some other
Mhm.
responsibility.
Yeah.
And so they're a little resistant because they're like, I don't have any more time available. I'm just trying to
Mhm.
get through the day. And I can completely respect that because their feelings about their life and their capacity, I'm not going to tell somebody, oh, that's not true. You just have to do this. It has to come to them in their time.
Mhm.
So after they do that, they do hit a point where they're like, okay, I am gonna go get a massage, or I am gonna go on this retreat or go on this girls trip with my friends. And they begin to integrate it into their lives on a quarterly system or quarterly basis. And there comes a point in most of the women's lives that I've talked to, women that I've coached, women in the self care suite community, where it just clicks. And for a lot of us, it's like around 40. Like that is what I have seen. They can go 40 years just kind of people pleasing and not really having a sense of that innate need for self care. And somewhere around like late 30s, early 40s, it just clicks for so many. And they decide, I don't want to live my life perpetually on a hamster wheel. And they begin to make some subtle changes here and there. And then before you know it, they are like you, they're starting podcasts and they're interviewing people and they're writing books and it's a really beautiful flip to witness in women's lives where they're like, okay, I understand where those weak spots are in my life or in my schedule, those tendencies that I have that may not be helping me emotionally or mentally. And they know how to address those in a way that is sustainable and long lasting. I think that's the thing that women who come into the self care suite, that's what I'm trying to get to, those sustainable practices that are long lasting, because those are the things that can allow you to experience more growth and more calm and more peace. I always say massages are great. Getting your nails done is great. I'm not ever going to say that's not self care and that's not
Mhm.
good. You can't do that. But thinking about those ways that you can tackle some of those bigger problems in your life, those bigger pieces that take a little bit of time to solve and work through, being able to tackle those gives you such a peace of mind. And whenever a woman is ready to take that leap, the community is ready, we can help you walk through it. And I think that is really what it comes down to for Black women is to be able to have that space when they're ready to say, okay, I do need to make some changes. What do I do? Or how would I say this? Or have you done this and did it work out? We need those spaces to have those conversations.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And having a community is almost like having a built-in cheer squad, encouraging you along, but also having the almost a permission-based
Mhm.
platform that says you can do self-care. There is nothing here that's telling you, or no one here that's telling you that you can't take time out for yourself and that you can't do the incremental steps it takes in order to embody this and make it a lifestyle for yourself. Like, so let's talk about some of the narratives that you come up against when you make the decision to take care of yourself. I know you mentioned that you had to set some boundaries, you had to let go of some clients and maybe some other people in your life. I had the same experience when it came to self-care. And I think for a lot of women, especially Black women, that's scary because, again, going back to community, going back to family, going back to what we have been taught is the traditional proper way to be in life. So when you start to move things and shift things because you're really making self-care priority, then that means some things and people got to go. So like how did that work for you and how do you help other women navigate through that process?
I think the one of the things that I try to hammer home in every single part of my work is that Black women have a tendency to lose sight of our own humanity. And that is not our necessarily 100% our fault. That is societal pressure, and um, it's very deeply entrenched.
Mhm.
And when we lose sight of our humanity, we begin to think that we should function like machines do. But one of the things that I always remind people is that even machines rest, right?
Yeah.
Like even computers go to sleep, cars stop, you don't run all these machineries in the factory 24 hours a day. Like they need to shut down for repair. And if they don't, then they will burn out. And that is the same thing that is true for us. So even everything rests. That's one of the things that I try to really hammer home for a lot of people is everything rests. Like nothing is continuous on this planet. And whether it's humans, man-made, everything rests. And so that's one of the first things that I have to say to women is that we have to remember our humanity. It is not possible for us to do everything by ourselves, solely, do it perfectly. And it's really a setup that a lot of us have been taught that, yes, we can. We absolutely can, and we should be able to. And as a Black woman, that is a pretty unique mantle that's placed upon us. Other women, different cultures, sure, expected to run the household and do all of these different things. But for Black women, it's particularly challenging because we're expected to do it all. And often we're expected to do it by ourselves. And bringing us back to our humanity, we recognize, okay, listen, I only have a certain amount of capacity each day. I only have a certain amount of energy. I only have a certain amount of mental space and clarity to be able to think about these things. I either need to do less, I need to bring in a team, I need to do both. We need to have those conversations about our humanity, because a lot of times what happens is we have these expectations on us and we're not quite sure if we feel like they should fit us. We feel like we should be able to. And often a lot of us feel like that because we've seen our mothers do it, or we've seen our grandmothers do it, or we've seen our aunties do it. And so we think we should be able to do what they did, but we don't really understand that what they did was the impossible, right? Like they were tired. If they had an opportunity to not do some of the things that they were doing, if they thought that there was a different way, or they thought that they had other options, maybe they could have chosen that. But for a lot of us, these conversations weren't being had with our moms and our grandmas. And so that legacy that gets passed down to us is really hard to fight against. But I think that when we do it, we also give permission to our moms and to our grandmas to evaluate what they're doing and evaluate how they're taking care of themselves. So it's a beautiful thing to be able to push back against some of these narratives so that we can not only have an example for those who are coming after us, but also an example for those of us who came before us.
Absolutely. Which, leads into, and every point you made is amazing, is great. And especially the legacy building, as well as going back generationally to help heal those past generations, which is truly important. And again, giving permission by your own behavior to say, you know what, you don't have to do it all. You don't have to be it all. You don't have to shoulder all the responsibility alone, and you don't have to be the strong Black woman, which I would love to segue into that, because I think even that narrative has been, I think, the linchpin, the Achilles heel for many Black women. Because I think it was 20 something years ago when I decided, you know what, I am no longer the strong Black woman. I refuse to be called that. I don't want to shoulder that responsibility. I think it's a label that gives people permission to dump on you and to expect that you will, like you said, keep going like a machine, like a robot, 24/7, and only be there for the benefit of other people, and be able to accept any type of abuse, any type of struggle or whatever, because you're a strong Black woman. So let's talk about that a little bit and how that narrative is changing. I'm seeing it change, and I'm so glad it's changed. We're putting down the cape. We're no longer super women, strong Black women, but we're human, just like you mentioned before. We're human, and we want to be seen as such. So let's chat about that a little bit.
Yeah. I think for a lot of us, and I'll speak first for myself, I think putting down the cape of being superwoman and being able to show up as a strong Black woman, I first had to understand the ways that it was harming me
Mhm.
because if I'm completely honest, it gave me a lot of pride at
Mm.
first.
Mhm.
To be able to say, I can handle this. At one point in my life, I was working a full time job. I had two kids under 3 years old. I was in grad school. I was working a side job, doing all of these things around how, like, I had so many things on my plate simultaneously. And I was really proud of how I was handling everything. And I'm like, yep. And everybody's giving me praise. And I'm taking my kids to class on days when their dad is at work or something. And I was loving, I feel strong, I feel powerful, I feel all of these things. And that lasted about maybe 7 months. And then I was like, okay, wait, I'm tired. Why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? And I know that for me, a lot of the conversations about putting the cape down, first it had to start with me. I had to tell myself, okay, just because I can doesn't mean I should. Just because I can doesn't mean it's the healthiest thing for me. Just because I can, it doesn't mean that I have to do it by myself. I can have people come in and support me. For example, during that time, that's when I asked my sister to come in because I was working from home. So I asked my sister to come in and help me with these kids like
Mhm.
twice a week and when she could. And that was a huge relief because then I had time to actually focus and not be writing with the baby on my lap all the time and everything. And so I had to realize first within myself that I am really tired.
Mhm.
And if I do not have a complete realignment in my life, I am going to burn out. And I don't think I was probably in my early 20s at the time. I'm like, I'm not going to make it to 40 at this rate, at this pace. Like, I'm
Mhm.
just going to burn myself out and run myself into the ground. I had a experience health wise during that time, and I'm writing about it in my upcoming book. But I went to the doctor I had all these types of physical symptoms. I had a rash that had come out. My hair was thinning. I was having like irregular heartbeats. Like all of these things were happening. I didn't understand. And I went to the doctor and she was like, okay, you have a little bit of a temperature. Did you know that? I was like, no, I didn't realize. She said, oh, your blood pressure is a little high. Is that normal? I was like, no, I don't think so. No. And she's just like giving me the once over and she's noticing all of these things that I came in for something else and she's uncovering five other things that we got to think about and look at. And so at the end of the checkup, she prescribed me whatever the medication was at the time that she needed me to take. And then she sat down on her stool and she just looked at me. And she said, what I want you to do, this was a Friday afternoon appointment. She said, what I want you to do is go home and I want you to get in the bed and I
Mhm.
don't want you to get out until Monday. That's what she told me. And I was like, okay, all right, sure, no problem. And I was ready to go. I was like, I got work to do. I need to get out of here. Hand me my prescription. I can go home. And she was like, no, I really want you to listen to me. I want you to go home and I want you to get in the bed and I don't want you to get up until Monday because it is obvious that you are doing so much that you're not noticing your body's signals. And I said, okay, all right. The second time, she had to tell me twice. I didn't
Yeah.
listen the first time. She had to tell me twice. And I always credit that doctor. And this was like a walk-in clinic or something. So I can't even remember, I can't even look up in my medical
Mhm.
history who she was so I can
Mhm.
thank her. But I always remember that appointment because she was the first person to look at me and
Mhm.
say, you are doing too much, like a medical professional. It's looking at me, looking at my vitals, looking at all of these things and saying, you are doing too much, and literally gave me a prescription to rest. Uh,
Mhm.
and I did go home. I did get in the bed. I told my husband what went on at the appointment. I said, I'm not allowed. This is what the doctor said. I'm not allowed to get up until Monday. And I spent the entire weekend in bed, went downstairs, got me some food, got some water or something. got up, took a shower occasionally, but I stayed in bed all weekend. And that was a catalyst for
Yes.
me to have a different way of living, and a way for me to really put distance between myself and the strong Black woman,
Mhm.
because I realized it was really having an effect on me physically. And I was way too young. I was like 23, 24. I
Yeah.
was way too young to be breaking down and having all this stress manifest itself physically. Way too young for all
Mhm.
that. And that was the moment that I said, okay, Kate, gotta go. It's
Yeah.
gotta go. Hmm.
Bravo for you. Thank you for sharing your story because I think a lot of women are experiencing physical symptoms of stress. They're not really realizing that it is because that's the root of it, and they ignore it like a lot of strong Black women do, because for whatever reason, a lot of us have a really high pain threshold. And we're like, oh, that's no problem. Oh, it'll be fine. I'm just going to take an aspirin. I'm going to take a Tylenol. I'm going to do something to numb the pain versus look and numb this and treat the symptoms instead of getting to the root of the problem. So that is something that I've really, even recently, had to check myself on. I was like, back when you had medical problems, medical issues, even when I look back on it now, because I had a whole reproductive system issue because of stress. And going into early menopause at 32 and being in this space where I'm dealing with bone density issues. Like my bones are getting weaker. I'm hot flashing. I'm brain fog, depressed, all the things that goes along with dealing with stress, but not really believing that it was that serious. Yeah, until it got to the point where the doctor were like, look, you're premature ovarian failure, you're in early menopause, you can get on these hormone replacement therapy medication. I highly recommend it. But at the time, back then, it was like, no, I'm not doing that. And that was like you said, the catalyst for me to wake up and say, I got to do something different. This is not working. It is not sustainable. I cannot hold on to this idea, this image of me of having it all together and while doing all the things and just so someone can pat me on the back and say, great job, while I'm dying on the inside. And it was this same situation and me thinking back to family and friends who were dealing with illnesses, stress-induced illnesses that they had no cure for, that they ended up dying from. And I'm like, I don't want to be that woman. I don't want to show up and people come to my funeral. Oh, she was good. She was a hard worker and all that stuff. No, ma'am, I do not want that. So that even goes into historically, I've been really doing a lot of research historically about how Black women have not had the opportunity or it's not been on the table for them to rest, to take naps, because you always have to look busy. And I know it comes from a slave mentality. It comes from a Jim Crow era mentality where you were literally by law required to work 7 days a week. You cannot be seen slacking off or being lazy or anything like that. And so there's this narrative, this epigenetic DNA induced issue where we are required. And even now society looks at us and thinks and almost requires us to be always on, always working, always looking heading toward a perfectionistic ideal of who we should be. What are your thoughts? Have you like looked into like even the historical perspective? Because even the help comes to mind when thinking about the lack of self-care and permission to be able to do that.
Yeah, I have, and I'm just realizing now when you asked me to do the intro and said, oh, what's a fun fact about yourself? I was going to say is that I'm writing my first book about Black women and wellness and generational legacy and all of that. And as a part of the book, I am one, like looking at that historical perspective. I want to take it back couple hundred years if I can and talk about what are some of these things that our legacy, what is our legacy in terms of being able to take care of ourselves and make decisions for ourselves. And also in the process of writing the book, I'm interviewing 100 Black women ages 19 to 95. So
Mm,
getting all of their perspectives in on this and everything. in our history, everything that I've read so far, everything about our labor history, because that's primarily what we have is a labor history.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is about this exhausting, unrelenting drive that we have to work no matter the circumstances. I just finished a chapter on professional wellness, and I took a look at what our history is in this country. And I stumbled upon some older magazine or newspaper articles, I want to say from World War One. There were some women in, I want to say Arkansas, Pine Bluff, Arkansas, they decided that they did not want to go in the fields and pick cotton for very low wages. I think they were getting paid like $1 a day for 16 hours of picking cotton, which I did the math, and it's like $20 a day now. So 16 hours, 150 pounds of cotton, you had to pick 16 hours. That type of backbreaking labor, like literally $20 could not buy you anything today.
No.
And to be expected to do that 7 days a week is crazy. They decided, these Black women in Arkansas decided that they were not going to go pick cotton because their husbands were over fighting overseas, and they were getting the military allotments for military wives. And so they finally had an option to say, oh, I don't have to do this backbreaking labor right now because we have our bills paid, because my husband is risking his life and I'm here taking care of the kids. And so I'm going to do this. And white women were doing the same thing. White military wives were doing the same thing. But what happened was the crops needed to be picked. The white women weren't going to do it. And so a group of business owners and other people with influence in the town tried to get the Black women arrested, right? Tried to get them arrested because they wanted to stay home and take care of their kids versus being in the cotton fields all day. And so luckily, and this is something that was really like mind blowing to me, but I think like I got all the way to the Secretary of Commerce or Agriculture or Secretary of War, one of those cabinet positions. And they wrote back, if you want the Black women to pay to pick the cotton, you need to pay them more. That's the solution to this. If you're not going to pay them more, leave them alone. And thinking about stories like that, where they don't respect our choice to not work. That is something that really informs how we are approaching this. Because again, this is our grandmothers and our great grandmothers that we're talking about, who we're like, what do you mean I can't? Well, I don't have to. For the first time, probably ever. We're okay right now, and I don't have to do this backbreaking labor. Don't I deserve to be able to tend to my family? And in the eyes of everybody else in the town, no, you don't.
Yeah.
And so we have that legacy. And so when we are talking about mental health days, or we're talking about finding a career that has either a hybrid or remote function so that you can be at home taking care of things, or if you just want to take a break from working while you're in school or things like that, we have to think about that legacy and that historical view, because that is what we're carrying into a lot of these conversations. And that is the expectation, is that we will always be working, and to do anything different is counter to that. And I think the more of us have these conversations and the more that we understand that historical lens, I think it makes it more of an imperative for us to be able to do this. Because I tell you what, when I sat there and I did the math on how much they were getting paid, like I'm literally thinking about bending over and over again, picking picking this cotton, trying to fill up 150 pounds of it, and how much that is, because cotton weighs nothing, right? Working in the hot sun 16 hours a day in Arkansas.
And then have to go home and take care of your children.
And then you don't have hardly any money. If you did that 5 days a week now, and you got you $100 or something, how far is that going to go? It's not. It's not. So those types of stories, unfortunately, are a huge part of our legacy, of our inheritance. And I am hoping that the further we go, the more we have these conversations, the more that we can really build together and figure out how we can build these lives where we are free to rest, free to say, no, I'm not going to be in charge of that, or free to set up boundaries, and free to claim a different title. Instead of the strong Black woman, we're the happy Black woman, we're the free Black woman,
Mhm.
liberated Black woman. Because I think all of those things, strength is great. I love being strong. I love being somebody who's a woman of her word. I love being able to run a strong house, but I'm not interested in being strong being my main identity. I want to have room for other identities in there as well.
Yeah, I love that you said that. Our identity, not having it wrapped up in this label and being able to define our own if we want to put a label on ourselves. But I think even then, we are not a monolith. We are not just this one thing. We are multifaceted. We are from nerds all the way to glamorous women. We have all those things in between and a combinations of those things, and which makes us have such a rich experience in life, which most of culture, the larger culture, they want to take what we have, the beauty that we have, the talent we have, the sense of community, and even down to our recipes. It's like, can I get some credit for that? And it's the value that we bring into the world is undeniable, is priceless. But the value that people want to put on it is pennies. And
Mm,
so it's, no, that's backwards. I know my worth and I know what I bring to the table. I have my own table, I don't even need to come to your table at this point. But then being able to include the self-care in that and making it an integral part of who we are, not being identified by labor, but being
mhm.
identified by humanity, self-care, even radical self-care, selfishness. A lot of people they back away from that word, but the
Yeah,
self is important.
yeah,
You must recognize and take care of the self in order to be able to do all the things, be and have all the things that you want to do, be and have, and make sure that you are living a full, rich life, not just a one-dimensional life. I'm just, again, thrilled that you get to be in this space, you get to share your story, and that you're encouraging and empowering and inspiring women to step into this beautiful, lush, comfortable place of self-care and not be afraid to be there and not care what other people think, because they really, at the end of the day, they can't be in your skin. They don't pay your bills. They can't dictate who you are any longer. We're not bodies that are bought and sold anymore, but we have our own autonomy and we own ourselves. Thank you for sharing all of this good information and content, and especially from the historical perspective. So tell us, I know that you said you're writing a book. So tell us more about the book, when it'll be out, and where we'll be able to find it once it's published.
yeah. So I am currently writing and I keep saying it's my debut
Mhm.
nonfiction title because I anticipate writing many more. So this is the first one of a few, and I've been writing this book since 2021. I've been working on it and started working on a proposal 2021. I sold it last year to
Wonderful.
HarperCollins, and it will be out in fall 2025. And I love that it'll be out fall 2025 because that will be right around my 40th birthday.
Oh,
So,
nice.
and I don't know the exact publication date yet, but I'm just really excited to birth this at that age. It just feels like something that was meant to be and something that I'm really thrilled to put out in the world at that time. And so it'll be available wherever books are sold. Excited to say that. This would be my first book published with a traditional publisher. I've written self-published books before, and obviously I loved being able to get it out quickly. Like as soon as it was done, as soon as it was
Right.
formatted, it was ready to go. Traditional publishing, it takes a little bit longer,
Mhm.
but I'm hopeful that with my team, that this book can go far and we can continue to have these conversations, because it's really vitally important. The more that I read, the more Black women that I talk to in the process of writing this book, I really recognize how how new this conversation is.
Mm,
I ask women all the time, and I'm interviewing 100 women. I've done about 80 so far. And I ask women all the time, what do you remember about your mom? What do you remember about
mm,
your female caregiver? What were they like? Did they have hobbies? And 8 times out of 10, they couldn't really remember their mother relaxing ever.
mm, mhm,
It wasn't something that they did in the presence of their children. They may have went in their bedroom and closed the door or something like that, but it wasn't something that was a overt lesson.
mhm,
Hey, take care of yourself. This is what I'm doing. It wasn't like an overt lesson. And so a lot of the women, one of the women that I interviewed, she talks about this generational self-neglect. And I was like, oh,
mhm,
that is a wonderful phrase.
mhm.
I will give you credit, but that is a wonderful phrase and a
Yeah.
wonderful way to think about it because we inadvertently, right? I don't think any of us set out to neglect ourselves or our mothers didn't set out to neglect ourselves. But inadvertently, that's what happens when you
Mhm,
are not either don't have or are not given the space to properly prioritize yourself. That's what happens is that self-neglect. And so really that's the opposite side of the self-care, right? Is that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to take better care of ourselves and conversations and spaces like this
mhm.
are just so crucial to helping that happen.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's powerful. Self-neglect
Mhm.
is almost like a punch in the face because you
Yeah.
get
When she said it, I was like, oh God.
OMG. But yeah, definitely will be keeping that in mind. And I'm excited about your book that's coming out. Do you have a title yet?
I do have a title. It's been the same title, and I pray, knock on wood, that it
Mhm.
stays the title. Because I have a couple friends who have written books and they said their title changed, but my title is Bloom How You Must.
Okay.
And I took it from a Lucille Clifton poem. So I'm kind of like, even the title of my book, like it pays respect
Mhm.
to other Black women who've come before me. So I'm really excited about it. I'm in the home stretch now of writing it. I have a couple more months before my final chapters are due. And this conversation is exactly what I needed, honestly, to be able to give myself a little bit more. I'm not necessarily in writer's block right now, but just you need your juices to keep flowing
Mhm.
so you can find the words. So this was perfect timing.
Good, good. Glad to facilitate that. So as we wrap up this interview, this conversation, that's more what it is. What's the biggest thing that you want women to know, especially Black women, about the importance of incorporating self-care into their daily life?
Yeah. I am in the process of all of my worlds always converge and I find messages and everything in that I do. And so I'm currently in the process of sending my daughter off to film school in the fall. She is looking to be a screenwriter,
Okay.
write for TV and film. So I'm really excited for her. But so in the process of doing that, I've been all year long helping her. She's in a couple film classes now, and she's been in different workshops and things like that. Like we've really been putting a lot toward her reaching this dream. And one of the things that has kept coming up for me in helping her and some of her work that she's done and some of the edits that her teachers have given her is about like strengthening the main character, making sure that the main character is the main character and not getting lost in the story.
Right.
And that is some really consistent advice that screenwriters get. Okay, this is getting too muddled, there's too many people, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that is very much aligned with the type of advice that I would give for Black women is remember that you are the main character. So many times we forget and we kind of place ourselves as a supporting role, or we place ourselves
Mhm.
as an extra, or we're the funny sidekick best friend. But we have to remember we're the main character.
Yes.
So by remembering that we are the main character, I think that requires us to move a little bit differently. And it requires us to think about one of the things I would say by being the main character, that forces me to move more slowly because I need
Mhm.
to think about myself, and it's not necessarily something that is completely 100% ingrained yet. I still need to give myself time to think so that I don't overcommit myself, or I don't commit myself to something that I'm going to later regret or wish that I hadn't. I move a lot slower now. Like, I don't rush to answer emails. I
Mm.
don't answer people's texts right away all the time. If somebody says, "Hey, do you want to hang out?" It may not be today. It might be like in a week or two when I feel like I'm going to have a little bit more mental capacity. um, just remembering that you are the main character, and not only are you the main character, but you're the executive producer, you
Mhm.
are the
Writer,
writer, you're
director.
all of those things,
Mm.
yes. And so just remembering where you are in the story of your life, you're at the center, and
Mm.
these things revolve around you. And that's a message that I think is particularly something that I think caregivers need to hear. And I
Mhm.
think Black women in general, we taking care of something. I don't care what it is, if it's kids, if it's parents, if it's nieces and nephews, we taking care of somebody.
Mhm.
I think just remembering that you are the main character is something that I want every Black woman to know.
That is a fitting ending to this episode. I thank you so much, Tara. That I'm Look, you have given me a spark, a reminder for even myself, because I'm in this space where I'm pulling myself back into this main character energy, learning what it's about, because it's like you said, it's not instinctual yet,
It's not yet.
but through practice, because we have to practice being the main character, just like we're the actor in a play, we are the writer, director, producer, like you just said. We have to practice and strengthen that muscle of being the main character. And because Black women have always been relegated to the supporting character role in film and television and media, in the church, in society, in schools, always the assistant, always the best friend, always the bridesmaid or whatever, but never really the main character. It's going to take like intentionality to do that, become that, embody that, make it a habit, make it so instinctual that our children understand that, hey, I'm the main character in my life and I don't have to take a back seat to anyone else. So thank you so much for sharing that last bit of wisdom with us, because that's something we really need to embody and really make a part of our lives. And thank you all for listening to the Blyssful Life Podcast. This is Samantha Gregory again, the Self Care Alchemist, where we are helping high performing women learn how to transform their burnout into bliss from the inside out, their radical self care. I look forward to talking with you again the next time. Have a great day.